The meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is we have construction items. I think we have 3 bids to review.
Yes, and we've got Kenny Davis here with Codell Construction. So Kenny, if you ready to review the 3 bid options with them?
Certainly. What I did, I broke this into 3 options. So that option 1, everybody has a sheet. Option 1 is base bid only, so it includes no alternates. Real quick, the alternates, so alternate 1 is owner preferred lighting controls. That was part of the really the cost came in the base bid.
Y'all got
This is the cost
this
for
one
you
right.
guys. Alternate 2 was owner preferred video system, same scenario, no additional cost for the district. Alternate 3 was parking improvements on Engineer Drive in front of the high school. Alternate 4 is a new parking lot on the back side of the, you guys have that?
Do we have 4?
Well, it's broken down into options behind it.
Yeah, it's option.
It's behind
Yeah,
it.
you have, yes.
But we only have through option 3, we don't have an option 4.
Okay, option 3 was our recommendation, which was everything, which was the headway, the site improvements of the parking lot at both in front of the high school and behind the ATC. Option 1 was just base bid only. That total was, the base bid total was $9,511,834.
You all don't have these 3?
I don't have them.
But
They
She
do.
does, okay.
We can
Donna
check.
does
She
have
does
it.
have them.
She's
Yeah,
got
she
them.
does.
Okay.
But I
I
don't.
wonder how they got,
Did you put these packets together?
I'll take the blame. Yeah.
So we have these options.
I have what you have.
You've
She's
got the 3 BG1s. Yeah, you've got the 3 BG1 options. But this spreadsheet here was, this was just talking about the bids. Yeah.
I can still walk you guys through it, that's okay.
Let me real quick, I
Go
can
ahead.
make one real quick while, let me get.
I can go by the BG1, but I don't need to. I'm gonna send Elliot over. I like your thinking. Yeah. He did, yeah. Well, that was 2 days post-op, and you know they told me,
Don't be out of the house.
well, no, that's so well after the bond, but they were at school. And he said, well, you know, Monday, and he said, you can see how long this on
Them saying, is that her? You know how they do. Lily stayed home. Lily stayed home a week.
Sorry for that, guys, but there was 3 revised BG1s, and I didn't make it clear that those.
So it was his fault. We have to blame somebody.
I know exactly what.
He's used to it. He don't care. He's got big shoulders.
What's that?
You can take it, can't you? You take the
what?
blame.
I don't take the blame.
You take
I
it.
should have made it, made it clear, that's for sure.
It's okay.
All right, now they've got them, Kitty.
You got that?
Yes.
We're good now.
Quite my fault, right?
No?
Yeah. Somebody.
All right, so like I was saying, option 1 is base bid only. That is just for the ATC building, that doesn't include any of the alternates today. That total was $9,511,834, probably, I can't hardly read, small print, 834, okay? Option 2 includes number one, alternate number two are no cost to you guys. You get what you want, but at no cost. So those are always going to be included in the bid. Option two also includes alternate three, which is the improvement parking out in front of the high school, and then the other parking lot, alternate four, which is behind the ATC building. Okay, that total, if you add all that up, it's $9,736,899. Okay. Option number three gets you everything, including the pedway. Option three is the pedway was $1,447,419, which brings the total to $11,221,028. We had 44 bids on bid day, had great coverage in every package. The only package we only had one bid in was the elevator, which we expected in these days. Really only one Kentucky company that's bidding all the work, and we're happy with those people. I will tell you that we are rebidding bid package 7, the drywall. I had 2 bids on that one. The one bid from Valley Interior was $285,690, and then Rising Sun was $510,000. It's a large discrepancy, and Valley asked to be released from the bid, and they told us they made an honest mistake. They didn't include some insulation that needed to be put in there, which equates to about $40,000 onto the base bid and $25,000 more onto the alternate number 5. So we'll rebid that number. I've already reached out to more companies. I'm on more competition than I had on bid day. Hopefully I get 3 or 4 more bids that we can maybe lock that number down even higher than that. But there will be additional costs added to the number that is read to you based off of that package rebidding.
It's due to bid, what's the date on that?
The 14th.
14th, so
Not this Thursday,
we'll
next
know.
Thursday. Yeah, week from Thursday.
We'll know pretty quick.
We'll know exactly what's going on.
Just so you all know, the original BG1 to construction cost was listed to be $9,430,000. So as you can see, if you just look at option 1, which is just the building itself with none of the alternates, they were all over top of it. Is less than $100,000 in terms of the estimate for this project. Once we got the plans and got the schematic and everything ready to go, so.
Yeah, we're bidding work all over the state. This is about as tight and about as good a coverage as we've had in some time. So we were really pleased with the results of bid day.
Do any of you all have any questions about the 3 bid options?
I just have a comment. We have the mock-up that shows the midway, and people have seen that. If you go with the base, that's not going to include that midway. And it's going to be misleading to the public. We have had that mock-up shown on Facebook and in the newspaper.
Yeah, and the way that it was bid is that it was bid as separate packages just based on what the cost could be, what the cost was projected to be on those, and then of course with the financing end of it to make sure that there was enough money to cover the cost of the building. So I mean, and that's why we come to you all today. You technically at this point in time would need to make a decision, sort of like we did on the bus garage with the alternates there, is that you would need to decide whether or not you're just going to take the base bid, which would not include any of the parking improvements or the pedway, or you just take the parking lots, which would not include the pedway, and then you would take the pedway. And as I've spoken to Kenny and Peter both, we honestly feel like that the $1,400,000 for the pedway, you got to remember that's just not the pedway. That's also 3 stories at the high school. Includes an elevator that will allow our students to travel over to the Area Technology Center out of the weather, out of the rain, the snow, whatever, out of the heat. It's not a conditioned space, but it will still be a lot better than them going outside, so it provides safety and security for them. Inside that area at the high school, which of course is 3 levels, there's 2 offices, and the bottom office will become our youth service center, which now allows us to meet state code in terms of the buildings program of studies that allows that youth service center to have its own entrance in terms of right there next to it, so parents can come. Parents would still have to come to the front of the building and they would go to the youth service center, but then when they leave there, if they're leaving there with, let's say, groceries, or they're leaving there with clothes or something else that we've given that family to try to help them, then they don't have to bring it all the way out in front of everybody. You know, they can exit that door and leave the building and have a little bit more privacy in terms of what they would have. And then I guess the biggest added feature of doing that, as far as we're concerned, right now our band students have to use the auditorium. The only means of egress to the band room is through the auditorium. And because of that, the auditorium, Mr. Yost can tell you, Ms. Tucker's been there, can tell you. I don't know if Mr. Winkler made it this afternoon. No, he had something to do, he told me. Anybody that's been there knows that with all that traffic going in and out of the auditorium, you just have wear and tear on that auditorium that shouldn't be happening. So now students that have band or they're in music classes, they can enter that through the hallway, through that corridor area, and they don't have to go through the auditorium. So the auditorium can be locked, it can be cleaned up, and we don't have to worry about somebody punching a hole through the screen, which has happened before, believe it or not. So it just gives you an area that was hard to supervise, and it doesn't matter who you are, who the principal is, it's just hard to supervise. You can't have somebody in there every minute of every day with it open like that. So I do agree. I think that the expectation has been all along, if we could afford the pedway, that's what we would do. And I've never made it a secret. I told everybody when the nickel was passed, Estill Springs was our #1 priority. Those 2 roofs was our 2nd priority. This area technology center was our 3rd. And I think that that's the promises that we made. And my recommendation to you all would be is that, and Mark is here today with Harriet Lyons, he can tell you that we do have the bonding capability to do it. I think, Mark, you said that once this is all done, we're going to have somewhere in the neighborhood of $4.5 to $5 million left in terms of bonding potential. Is that correct?
That's assuming full equalization of the nickel in the coming budget.
Which, based on my conversations with legislators, they are definitely committed to funding the nickels that have already been funded. Now, they're talking like that there may not be additional funding for any school district that has a new nickel, but now I'm already hearing there's legislators in those school districts that have passed the nickel since that has been said, and they're already saying they're not committed to that. I just don't think in the long run, I think those districts will eventually be equalized as well. When you have a local taxing community, a local community like Estill County steps up and they keep their end of the bargain by passing the nickel tax for school construction, I doggone wouldn't want to be a legislator that wouldn't sit there and support the equalization of that, that's for sure, and that's what they're running into. So we've got the money to do it. My recommendation to you all is that we take all 3 alternates and we build it just as we've advertised that building. And that's my recommendation to you all.
Do we have a motion?
Well, I think, historically, ever since that we've been talking about this VOTEC and its what direction to go, and we had looked at several different scenarios, and some of it being if we got this grant money from EDA, and if we passed the nickel, and if we were able to do all of these things, and so all options were looked at, and I think the 3 options that he laid out for us gives us all or nothing, and just the basis. So I'd like to make a motion that we do this project right, and that we go with option number 3. That leaves everything completed, nothing left undone, and then we can move on with our finalization at the high school and get that athletic field and some of those things finished up. So I think option 3 is the best. That leaves everything taken care of and done. And I would like to make a motion that we move forward with this project, and option 3 is what I'd like to make a motion for.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll do the same. Just a second. I complete the project.
Any discussion?
Just have a statement. I don't know, it's, in the eyes of the public, it's a $1.7 million increase. It's a big difference, and I understand that, but I really don't want to leave no stone unturned on this, and I really want to do it to the best of our capabilities. I want us to set the standard for all the districts around us, so.
Well, and if you all remember, that's one reason we started pursuing the EDA grant and worked with very closely with Codell Construction and Ross Tarn on that project. And of course, Teresa and Charlotte worked diligently with that grant. And just think, if you did not have that $4 million grant right now, Mark just told you that you had $4.5 to $5 million left, you would have nothing left. There would have been no money left at this point. So the whole reason for going after that EDA grant was to be able to give us everything that we wanted. And we wouldn't be able to do that without it. So that EDA grant was a blessing in the long run.
Yeah, I just think that this is an investment in our community and in our kids' future. And, I've pondered it. I've been in on this since, day one, and I think it's the right thing to do. And we don't leave it in another board's hand to try to finish up an unfinished project.
I think you're right. It's a hard pill to swallow. Can't hardly say $1 million. I mean, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. It's almost two.
Turn his mic on.
But I'm sorry. I was just saying that whenever you get to thinking about millions of dollars, that's a lot of money. It's kind of hard to say sometimes whenever you put it in this perspective. But I also look at it from the same standpoint that I don't want to spend $9.5 million and not get what we want. And I would just soon go ahead and go for the gusto, as they say. So, yeah. So.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay, so next on the agenda, we have the award the contracts for the Area Technology Center of Construction.
Yeah.
So we go to the
Well,
revised.
that's pretty much what you just
did?
did. When you approved option
Okay.
3, you awarded the contracts as well. So I think, Felicia, we can make that motion amended, that you take option 3 and award the contracts to the contractors that was listed here on the first
Just
page.
make sure the minutes reflect that we're going to rebid in package 7 that I have on 14. And then we can, at the next board meeting, we can, have a special board meeting, I don't know when your next one is, to approve that bid, I think we'll enter the contract. I'm going to go, I'll get the ball rolling, everybody else, all the other contractors now, but that one, I'll have to wait till you guys approve it before I can.
And we can come right back at the November meeting the following week and do that. BG1.
So next we have the revised BG1.
You can get rid of, you had the original BG1 in there, so you can put it aside and also put aside option 1 and option 2. So that brings you to the BG1 for option 3, which total construction costs, including your contingencies and all your fees, is $14,623,000, a little and some change. And you will see the financing plan over there. If you've got any questions about the financing, Mark is here in terms of explaining any of those numbers that you might want explanation on, but as you can see, the financing would be SFCC bonds, your local FSPK. There are some cash amounts there, and that's because right now that nickel is not fully equalized, so we had to include the cash amounts just in case, as an emergency policy, something did go awry and they didn't do that, then that covers us for what we would have to do. And then, of course, you see the two grant amounts there. So Mark's here to answer any questions you may have or any other questions that may arise from that, but my recommendation is that we approve a revised BG1 in the amount of $14,623,399.45.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was looking for one.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, motion passes. So next we have to consider the approval of a resolution authorizing a contract rent and lease with Estill County School District Finance Corporation.
And for you guys, it's new to the board. The Board of Education cannot enter into a finance plan. That's what the District Finance Corporation is, which of course you all are the District Finance Corporation. So, and that all the bonding has to go through that entity. So we would need to approve this resolution, and then we would temporarily adjourn so that we could convene the Finance Corporation.
Make a motion.
Okay, we have a motion.
Motion, yeah. Sorry, I was just reading.
Any discussion? All in favor to, okay. All right, so we need a motion to adjourn, temporarily adjourn.
I make a motion.
All in favor?
And nobody has to leave the room. It's public knowledge.
Okay. So I'm calling this meeting to order.
Exactly.
Okay.
Mark, at this time, if you want to just sort of, if you want to talk just a little bit through and just let them sort of know with two new board members, just so they'll know exactly what's going on here and for full disclosure for them.
Well, as Jeff mentioned, so the board itself can't enter into long-term debt. So we have we created the School District Finance Corporation, which is also you guys, to actually issue the debt. And so the school board will enter into a lease agreement with the School District Finance Corporation, and that's how we're able to actually get around the prohibition on long-term debt. As far as the bond issue goes, assuming KDE hits their approval timelines, and that is somewhat of a question mark these days, but if they hit their approval timelines, we're scheduled to sell bonds the first week of December, which is when we would actually lock in your interest rates on the bonds. That's when we would know the exact cost of everything in terms of repayments and things like that, and how much capacity you'll have left over. Interest rates are very low right now. They've been very low all year. It's a great time. A year ago, if you'd have tried to do all of this project, I'm not sure you'd have been able to afford it. That's how much higher interest rates were last year than they are right now. This is a great time to do as much as you can, because this is the cheapest money you're going to get probably in a long time. So, if all goes according to the plan, we'll sell the bonds the first week of December, close before Christmas, so you would have your money in hand before the Christmas holidays.
And so you guys will know, in the meantime, of course, we approved a resolution several board meetings ago that will allow for us to pay ourselves back, pay the general fund back for all of the architect fees and items that we've already paid for in this project, which we've got a pretty extensive list of things that we've already paid for. It will also allow us, we also have enough money on hand that will go ahead and complete the land purchase here within the next 10 days, hopefully, because that will determine when the bus garage starts. The deed is being prepared right now, and they're finalizing those documents. I think we can close on that property sometime at the end of next week. Matter of fact, you're going to be asked to approve those checks here in a minute. We won't be sending any of those checks out until we have everything ready to go. But you've got in front of you sort of the bond sale list, so we've got enough cash on hand. We've been really good. That's when it comes in handy to have a contingency that's above the 2%, which we're at about $1.6 million on the contingency. That money, most of that money's in CDs right now, so we've got enough financial backing to make these payments until the bond sale sometime, hopefully, like he said, right after Christmas. So my recommendation for the Finance Corporation is that we approve the resolution as stated, so that the bond sale can take place.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, I need a motion to adjourn. All in favor? All right. Calling this other meeting back to order now.
At 3:32.
Okay, so next on the agenda, we have Multi-Vista Construction Documentation Demo.
Yeah, we have Ernest with us, and last time you all approved Multi-Vista as a construction documentation firm that will come in and sort of go through step by step of this building process, but you said have Ernest here and let him show us in about 10 or 15 minutes, this is what I can do for you all. And I've sent him information today to get in contact with Kenny and Peter. So Ernest, the floor is yours, man.
I appreciate it. Can everyone see the TV okay?
Let's, we'll turn it to where the board can see it.
Probably we'll do it like that. Can everybody hear me okay?
Can you all see that?
This is typically a 30-minute presentation with questions that follow, so I'm going to give you the condensed version. I hope that's okay, but I think you'll have a pretty good idea what we're going to be doing for you. So what we do is we send out a live photographer that comes out beginning literally before construction begins and captures very specific shoots throughout construction all the way through to the end and finished. What we do, much more importantly than that, is we're using very high-end cameras that you're able to zoom in and out on photos and see every nook and cranny of photos. And then we organize them on a platform. You'll literally have here in a few moments, we'll be looking at arrows over plans so that you'll see exactly that we're putting the photos, we're linking them right back to the drawings, and it gives you the most accurate reflection of where everything's going to be covered up behind walls, above ceilings, and under the slabs. We've been in business 15 years nationwide. This is our 11th in Kentucky. When I began almost 6 years ago, we had probably documented about 25 to 30 projects in Kentucky. We're probably at 500 right now. We've got 114 current projects right now. In 2009, we documented 125 million square feet nationwide. 4 years later, we did 325. We almost tripled. We'll do over 2 billion this year. We're growing like crazy. So I'm going to go through and just give you some very quick information from our slides and then jump into a couple of shoots so you can really see it, because we're much better shown than told. During the course of the project, we're a great facilities management tool. You'll be able to address 1/3 of all QA/QC concerns throughout construction. We're great for any type of dispute resolution, any finger pointing, which we see on a lot of projects if you have mistakes and those type of things if they come up. And then most importantly for your facilities maintenance teams, on the back end of the project for the life of the building, they'll be able to take their smartphone or an iPad and walk up to any wall, ceiling, or floor and be able to see what's been covered in those areas so that they can repair those issues in the least costly, most efficient manners. Okay? Once we get on a project, we'll typically get the plans from the architect or CM involved, if you will. We like to get a specific type of drawing so that we can remove layers and make them very clean as we hotspot the photos that we take, so that there's a great clean landing, if you will. As I mentioned, we're using a live photographer dedicated to your project. I've got 4 that cover the state of Kentucky right now. My least experienced guy has been with me for almost 4 years, so I feel very confident saying that you'll have the same person from beginning to end. Once they take each given shoot, if you will, throughout construction, we upload everything to the cloud within 24 to 48 hours. We want to give you a live working tool with remote project management from literally anywhere. You can, whether it's a laptop, desktop, again, smartphone or iPad, you can go into the project 24/7. We house everything in the cloud, as I mentioned, and we'll create a project platform for each one of these projects that are separate, but whoever has access to them, and you determine all of the access as well. And then once we upload those first shoots, it's all your proprietary information. So if you want to put it on a website and share it with the city, if however you want to do it, whether it's Facebook, social media, however you want to do it, it's yours to use how you want. It's your property at that point. At the end of the project, we'll supply you with 2 archives. I actually need to update this. It should be flash drives or jump drives now, but we also keep it online. So as your facilities crews bump into things down the road, they'll be able to load their own photos, report issues, if you will, make comments on them, and tie them right back to the drawings themselves, so you still have an interactive platform for the life of the project, okay? I'm going to jump by and actually go right into some shoots here. So once you get to this area, you can enter either through a floor plan down in this area. I always suggest that you go to the floor plan drop-down because it's going to maximize your efficiency. Again, we separate everything by scope as well as the levels of the project. So now you're really seeing what our product looks like. You've got arrows over plans. Every arrow represents a photo, and then every photo has been tied back to the drawing from where we took it. So if I hover over any of these arrows, those corresponding images are going to come up. They're timestamped by date, indexed by photo number. If I'm looking at red arrows, they're going to be toward the ground, the floor, or this, the ground, the floor, or the street, if you will. There. If I'm looking at blue arrows, they're going to be pointed upward or towards ceilings. And if I go to orange arrows, they're all going to be horizontal shots or straight ahead. As you can see, as they open up, they're again timestamped by date, indexed by photo number. You have the ability to make comments on any photos. All of these comment markers are reflecting that. These have been issues that have popped up during the project. And just like if I'm going to upload photos, if anyone who has access to the project can use our mobile app and integrate your own photos throughout the project, anyone, whether it's Kenny and his team or the subs, or if you've got inspectors and things like that as well, they can integrate those photos if they'd like. When they do that, they can either do it to a full project team, they can do it in a customized level if I wanted to talk to somebody behind the scenes about a certain issue, or if I'm a project manager or a site superintendent, I can kind of check my boxes on my own issues as I go and make sure that they've been taken care of. Now, as I select an image, you'll see a thumbnail pops up in the top right here, and then I'm going to go a little bit further and take you to our full platform. I mentioned earlier that you have the ability to zoom in at a very high level. So as this populates, and I apologize, I'm using a hotspot right now trying to make sure this works. It might be a little bit slower, but as we get here, you'll see the timestamp of date, index of photo number again. On the bottom here, we've got a running thumbnail train of all the photos we took on that day. Photo number 47 actually corresponds to this highlight right here. And then as I mentioned about the zooming in, I can zoom in at literally 800% with no loss of pixelation and pull and scan every part of that photo to see what it is I'm trying to confirm or validate as I move around. Additionally, we've got some new features. We just changed the way our software looks here, but you can actually do some split screens so that you've got both pieces so you can see exactly where you are, and just makes it a little bit more user-friendly. I'm going to show you 2 more shoots. We've got 6 planned. We've got pre-construction photos, which these will be all, the shoot that I'm showing you right now is all pre-construction prior to their mobilization. So we'll capture all the streets, curbs, landscaping, surrounding buildings, anything that's around that current project area, so you'll know exactly how it was prior to construction. If there's any damage to the roads or curbs or whatever the case may be, you can always go back by the timestamp and see how it was prior to that mobilization. Next, I'm going to take you to an exterior progression to show you our progressions. And we do these on the exterior of the project as well as on each wall in every room on every floor, okay? And so when I'm going to show you the exterior, it's just because of time, but what we'll do is we'll start these at foundation stage, we'll surround the project 360 degrees, and then we'll take these on a monthly rotation from the same vantage points all around the building here. Once I select a photo, you'll see that on a progression, it gives me a time-lapse progression from that vantage point. So I've got the ability that once I go and select a photo, I can either walk around the project on this given day, which I'm going to do right now, Or if there's a specific point that I want to hone in on, all I have to do is at the very bottom here, you'll see where it says same day. I'm going to click an arrow button here, and now I'm going to go to the same location. So rather than being around on a certain day, it just changed everything from that specific vantage point or that location. And then now I can walk through the project through time, month by month from that specific point. And so, do you all like that? And so it's very handy. Our software is very slick the way we've designed this. And so the same thing, if you're looking from an internal perspective, once we start on the walls of the projects, it'll do the same thing. The only difference is we'll start at substantial framing. You've got to begin the pace of erection of the walls before we can capture them. But it will take you through the process of the wall, just like you saw the outside here, okay? This is a great shoot because these progressions allow you to monitor your trades for the work they're doing. It really allows you to track and monitor schedules and delays and materials used. I typically show all types of claims and things that, as far as examples. In this setting, I typically don't. You'll have to trust that Superintendent Saylor has seen this and knows that we've made a good decision here. We also will capture all of the under slab utilities. I'm going to jump right to the walls and ceiling, but I want to show you just one little difference here. This is what an interior progression page looks like, what I was just talking about the walls a second ago. This is a, oh, did I lose my connection? Let's see here. That's the problem, okay. Wonderful. Bear with me for just a moment and I will jump right back in here.
I think you already can see what this can do. I mean, just with the public, you know, that they can see time-lapse photos of this building going up.
They can see progression.
And, yeah. And then he's getting ready to show you what maintenance, what that's going to mean for our maintenance personnel. Because listen, they're not always going to be here. Todd's not always going to be here, but 20 years from now when we have a new Todd, if Todd, I think Todd will be retired in 20 years, won't he? So when there's a new Todd, they're going to be able to take that cell phone, go right to that wall. They know that a pipe's leaking. They're going to be able to know that, and they'll be able to go right to it. They won't have to knock 3 holes in the wall to find the pipe, because it'll go almost right to the. You can take it right to the area.
So this will be a continuous document years after.
Yeah.
Archive everything.
Well, every time something's changed or repaired, they can take a picture of it and upload it, correct, Ernest?
That is correct.
5 years from
Yep.
now, they do something different. There needs to be, let's say there needs to be some new electrical outlets run in that building. There's not enough power in that particular room.
There we go.
They can show where they've run it, and they can document it, and they've got it.
Just because I may lose this again, I'm going to jump through these too quick, and then I'll mention just a few other things. So this is an interior progression. This is what a progression looks like. We go in, we take 4 to 5 images per room, beginning at substantial framing. And then just like the exterior, you walk right through that wall's progression throughout the project. So here's the difference. So now I'm going to take you to the MEP. This is going to be the same floor, the same hospital. You're going to see a significant difference in the amount of arrows here. So now, when we do these, this is called a mechanical, electrical, plumbing. We're capturing everything behind the walls and above the ceilings. When we take these, it gives you the impression that the entire project was ready on that day, but this is multiple trips. We're going to follow the contractor's workflow where they're covering wall separate from ceiling. So in many cases, we'll be out here 3, 4, 5 days a week for weeks at a time as they're going through this process. But what you get is, and I'll just show you a quick photo here, but you are left with photos like this where you can actually go right above the ceiling. I'm going to have you look at a yellow shutoff valve. And this shoot's great because it will help to verify installation of systems. It'll help to mitigate disputes amongst your trades with finger pointing. But if you notice this yellow shutoff right here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And if you actually look above that, we're not trying to do this. This is just a basic lens, but you can actually make out the 300 PSI USA on the photo here. We've got different lenses that we use. If you're in a 30-story building, we're taking these all feet to ground. I can put your eyeball wherever you want it to be, honestly. We work with a lot of schools. I want to make sure you all know this and feel comfortable, but we've We're currently doing the Martin County Technology Center, very similar to yours. They had hired us to do Martin County High School and then hired us for this one. I'm on probably, I think it's 17 different K through 12 projects right now. I work all over the state. We're as far west in McCracken County on New Lone Oak Middle School. I work with both the Bowling Green Independent System and Warren County Schools, Fayette County, Clark County, Hardin County. I could go on and on for the amount of work that we do with these type of projects. So I think you'll be really pleased what we do. Do you have any specific questions? I know that's fast. I just don't want to take your whole meeting up here.
I'm impressed.
It's a very neat system. It really is. And it's we actually, even our photographers, we try to keep it closer to 24 hours once they upload those photos. All of their bonuses are based on that so that the quickness gets that activity up so that you guys can see it as soon as possible.
Like Sheila was saying earlier, I think this is a big tool for the public. I mean, very much so for us also, but sorry. Mic is on. I keep forgetting, Don, I'm sorry. It'll be a very big tool for us to see, but I think also, more importantly, the taxpayers who are funding this, a lot of this, and it'll give them a bird's eye view. I think we will all be able to feel like we are a part of what is going on at any given time, at any date, whenever any picture is taken. So I'm thoroughly impressed.
You guys will all have access as well, so you all will be able to go in and do whatever you need to do. I like it for the fact that, Kenny and Peter will have access as well, so, if there's disputes on the job about an electrician that's not done something or not wired something correctly, all you gotta do is go to the shot. It's gonna be there. You're gonna know. So the proof is gonna be there, and not that I think that we have to, not that we have contractors that's going to try to do something, on purpose, but, it does take away that, when it's being documented like this, it takes away that any thought of, okay, we may be able to do this a different way. It sort of puts everybody on the same playing field. So it's a good tool. I think it'll be great. As soon as I saw it, I knew this is what we've talked about. This is something that would be good. I wish we'd got hooked up a little bit at Estill Springs. We sort of missed the boat on that one a little bit. It would have been good if we'd had that, but that's okay. We'll get this, and as we move forward with the high school, especially because of the HVAC renovation and stuff that's needed there, we can get that on record, and I think it'll be a good tool for us moving forward. So wise decision last time to, I think, approve this, and Ernest, we appreciate you for coming today.
I'm very glad to be working with you all, to say the least, so appreciate it.
Any questions?
We just want it done right.
And this will help ensure that it is done right.
When my photographer shows up, and I'm going to guess 35 to 65 times, depending on how many cover-ups there are, and he's carrying this big camera every time he walks up, everyone's walking taller and straighter and making sure. And the flip side is it's not just about mistakes, it also confirms great work.
Yeah.
So,
That's right.
If you, any repairs, you know exactly what materials you need going to do those repairs in the location.
it makes it very convenient to find exactly where you need to go.
We're doing several jobs with Ernest right now. I'm currently doing Martin County High School and ATC, so the guys in the field, when they see them, they know what's going on. So you're right, it is an extra layer of security for you guys now, but the biggest thing is that if something 10 years from now happens, you know exactly where that pipe is in the wall. You're not tearing the whole wall down to find the pipe. That's the key.
Good deal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, it's time to pay the bills.
Yeah, we normally don't pay bills during a special called meeting, but as you can see, and thank you guys for coming. As you can see, this is all involved with one construction invoice that was during the demo of the bus garage, and then the rest of this is dealing with the land and site acquisition It's $251,245.83. And this way we can have those checks written, they're ready to go. So as soon as we close on the property next week, we can hand them their checks and file the deed in the courthouse, and we're done. So my recommendation is to approve the warrant.
Motion?
Hey, yes, sorry.
I second.
Second on
Any
that.
discussion?
No.
All in favor? Okay. To the part you all were all here for. Look at those smiling faces out there.
Well, this is the thing that, as a board and as the superintendent, we've got to be very diligent about. It's great to have great facilities, new facilities, but what goes on within those four walls is what we're about. We've made a lot of progress in the last 4 years, but I would be the first to tell you we're nowhere close to where I think that we could have been. We've got examples of when we do follow protocol and we do systems work that we can see what happens and what can happen that's good. And we've just got to be more consistent, and I think we've got a group of administrators here that will communicate that to you all. I'm going to let Tanya start out. I've asked them to take somewhere around 15 to 30 minutes to just talk. So Tanya's going to start off with just a few minutes, and then we're going to turn them loose in the order that they're listed, and we'll go from there.
All right, just Mr. Saylor wanted me to share a little bit about where we are right now as far as the district and school improvement process. We have several phases that we go through. The state tries to keep us on track, and we try to do little bits of things because this process is very massive, as you can imagine. So I want to tell you where we've been and kind of where we're going, all right? If I could do that. We have been through the envisioning phase, which means we look at our current reality, which includes test scores and all kinds of data that we have, you know, not just test scores, but any kind of data, any kind of survey data, all of those things we look at, not only at the district level, but at each school has to do the same thing. And then this year, our process has been a little bit different. We have asked everyone involved in this process to really look at our potential future. And we've asked them to look 5 years ahead. And we have brainstormed some things that where we kind of feel like here we are now, and we think these things are coming in the future. So we do that so that we can establish a foundation for decision-making about our continuous improvement planning. And so we have already done that. All the schools have done that as well. We are right now in the planning process. Now, we've done a little bit in this planning process. We have developed some priority statements, and I'm going to show you that in just a minute, and some strategic themes, okay, of how we want to develop our objectives in order to improve. And we are asking that the public, all of our stakeholders, go to our district website, and this is for our district plan. And if you'll see this apple right here on the district website, if you click on it, Vanna there, okay? So if you click on that, thank you, Jeremy. Double click, sorry. And you go down to district strategy map, you're going to see this is what it's going to look like this year. So we can actually, instead of giving you multiple pages, remember all those pages and pages and pages, they have developed another platform in which we are a pilot of. This is the second year of our pilot, and so the state is letting us use this platform this year instead of the old one, okay? And so last year we did both platforms. We did double work. This year we only have to do this one with a few exceptions of some reports that are required by law. But if you'll notice, it has our vision, mission, and belief statements at the top. And then you're going to see going across student excellence, workforce excellence, community, financial, and operational excellence. And then you're going to see down below there our priority statements and objectives. And then when you get on down there, and this is still in draft form, but I want you all to go on and look at it. That's why I want you to see where you find it. Go on down, Jeremy. You're going to see our key measures. And so each one of the schools have their own, and those should be loaded on their website as well. So you can go right now and look and find those. Now, what we want our stakeholders to do is to give us feedback. So Jeremy, if you'll go back, you're going to find just a Google District Stakeholder Feedback survey. You just click on it, and then there's places to write in each one of those themes, okay? So we want you to look at that and then give us feedback, and then we're going on to our next step, okay? So this whole process has to be finished by January the 1st. But the board does have to approve all of our plans in the December board meeting. And all schools have to have their plans approved in addition to that in the site-based council meeting in December. So we are moving forward, and we've had a little bit of issue trying to navigate the platform. But we are moving on, and I really like this one better because it's forcing us to look in the future. So this plan will actually be a 4-year plan instead of just a 1-year plan. And so I think it will be a lot better. So any questions about where we're at? And I'm going to come back to you probably soon.
So you're asking people in the community to go to the website, click on the apple, and follow the instructions?
Follow the instructions, yes. And I would ask them, to go to each school's web page as well. And, if you have a child at high school, you need to go to their site, look at what they've got planned, and give them feedback on that. That makes sense? Okay, we appreciate the feedback because we really need to know what our stakeholders feel about what we have planned. Mr. Silers, or anything else?
No, and as she said, we'll be back in December. Everybody's working hard right now, going through the process. So we do want the public's feedback. Parents, community members, we want feedback from all stakeholders. So it's very important to us in order for us to do that. This is a public school district, so we do need your feedback. We don't want to operate on an island. We want a lot of feedback on that. So,
plus it allows the parents and all the people invested in our district to actually do it from the comfort of their own home. They have to worry about getting to a meeting that may conflict with something else they have arranged.
Yes, that is a good point, Sheila. Thank you.
and if anybody going by, they don't have internet at home, you can pretty much pull up in the parking lot right at the central office and you can get on Wi-Fi. I mean, it's different places, but I mean, for public Wi-Fi, I mean, you
The
can.
library would probably be the best.
Library's best place. I
Or
mean, there's
McDonald's.
other places that you can get on.
Or I'm gonna say, Mr. Saylor, if anybody would like a copy of it, just call me and we'll print a copy and either have it, you can pick it up, or we can even mail you a copy. You know, we want everybody that wants a copy of it to have it.
They have more options as well.
Yeah.
So other than just word of mouth, have parents and people in the community been told about this? Or how's the information getting out there? Is this the first time people have been told about it, or?
You will have to ask the principals what they have done to try to get the word
Okay.
out, but of course, whenever we post, if you have that app, you know, it'll come up and say, you know, we've posted something, so.
Because we'll get questions about that.
Yes.
So that's why I'm trying to clarify. So, yeah.
We also posted to the district version, to the district Facebook and Twitter
Yes.
pages. I don't have access to the schools, so there's no responsibility to post it to their social media outlets. But I think they're going to.
And I think principals, I would ask you as it goes home in your Friday folders, your Thursday folders, to your parents, if they'll information on that. Every youth service center sends that information out, resource center, so get it out there in print, social media, get it out there, and that way we can get the right amount of content.
Do we put it in the newspaper?
We actually could do it, no, we haven't put it in the newspaper yet, Sheila, simply because it's still draft.
Okay.
And so we could put a statement in there or do a one-call probably.
Right.
Would get,
There are
but you're
a lot-
not going to get your community people that way. We need our community people. You know, our community stakeholders. But I'll look into that.
Because there's people with limited resources
Oh,
in
yeah.
the newspaper or something they can
Yeah,
look at.
yeah, yeah. It is important.
Okay. Y'all ready? We'll start with, I guess,
West Urban.
Estill Springs and West Urban, and the reason why they're working together is because through accountability, Estill Springs and West Urban are considered one and the same, so the accountability is between both school districts, so they have to work very closely together. And of course, we've also got the other piece of the puzzle in the back as well with Mr. Willis. He'll be presenting his preschool data in December. It's still embargoed, some of it. So he's going to do it during that time. And we also have Brooke with us as well. And Miss Tony Garrett's back here as well. So the assistant principals are here as well. So we'll turn the floor over to you, ladies.
No, I don't think so.
No, I think everything we have is on
low-tech.
the handout that we've given them. You want me to start?
Yeah.
Okay. So last year was the first year that the state made the decision that for any district that had a feeder school, such as Estill Springs as a primary school into an intermediate school, that our schools would share that accountability. We didn't need that to be a state mandate in order for us to feel that about our work together or to feel that about our students and their success and the success of our staff. Charlotte and I have felt that way all along. But that did give us even more reason to make sure that we were communicating with each other effectively about the instructional aspect of what our teachers were doing, as well as the success or the struggles that our students were having. So I wanted to say that first and foremost, because I have had a lot of people talk to me about, well, what do you think about that? It really hasn't changed anything about how we communicate. So I wanted to lay that foundation. We truly do believe that we own every student in this district and that their success resides in each and every one of us. So for us to sit down and discuss the data from last year's K-Prep, we talked specifically about third grade, which was what I was asked to kind of focus on. But what we also looked at trends across preschool through fifth grade. We looked at our elementary schools as a unit. So we have prepared a handout for you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the third grade data, which is what I have kind of focused on. And I want you at any point in time to stop and ask me any questions or if you need additional clarification on that. In order for us to look at where we're going, we have to take a look at where we've been. I should coin that phrase. I'm teasing. But we had to take a hard look at our third graders from last year, so that's who we're talking about. We wanted to look at what they scored as second graders leaving Estill Springs. So I've given you that data and then the third grade K-Prep data. Now, we know that MAP is a good indicator of where students are going in regards to K-Prep. And what we've seen here is that there is a disconnect for our students when actually moving to that paper and pencil assessment. So we have to ask ourselves some questions. Is it a content issue or is it a testing issue? So I'm going to kind of jump a little bit down to, I want you to take a look at current steps. Right now at Estill Springs, we are in the discussion and creation phase of a second grade K-Prep-like assessment that we hope to give in the winter and in the spring. Something that also gives us another look at their current state in reading and in math, and also taking a look at the writing piece. But it also will give the students some preparation for what that test feels like. The K-Prep assessment is a big deal, and it's a timed assessment. The stakes are high. But we all know that when you practice, perfect practice makes perfect. And so we want, if anything, we want to begin the process of making sure as second graders that they are not afraid of the assessment. So that's something that we're working on in order to prepare them for third grade. Another big change, which is listed as our current step and next step, is the change in our writing instruction. I go all the way back as a teacher to the fourth grade writing portfolios, and somehow that thread has still remained. And I'm not saying that we should throw the baby out with the bathwater, but writing is very different now. And you all know as adults that in the real world, nobody ever comes up and says, Miss Samples, I would love if you would sit down and write a personal narrative. No one ever asks you to do that, but yet that's what we still in our minds have spent a lot of time on, is just creating writing pieces to pass along. We have met as a district writing team and had a lot of discussions on the fact that that's not producing students. It's not about producing students who can write on the K-Prep. It's just about producing students who know how to write, and how to write for the future, and how to write that's in a real world setting. So as a district, we are focusing on our writing program, and at Estill Springs, in line with that, we are looking more so at not producing just polished, over-conferenced pieces that move with a student, but more so producing students who know what a paragraph looks like, who know how to respond to a question, how to write, and that's a real world experience. Those are things, whether it's writing a letter or writing an email, those are the things that I think we can do at Estill Springs that will help them for the future, but specifically in the future for testing. Due to the district support, we have increased our accountabilities in the areas of science and social studies. We have the charge grant that's leading that, but also our teachers have had a lot of very intense focused work with Tanya Miller, and I think that exposure, that's been a benefit for Estill Springs because Miss Miller's experience has been primarily in intermediate, so she's able to bring back a lot of that knowledge and how can we impact instruction at the primary level. We're just continuing to focus our efforts on that Plan, Do, Study, Act, our PLC format, because as the standards have changed, we need to make sure that we're not taking for granted that our units, as polished as they may be, we still want to take that opportunity to look at our assessments and to look at our instruction and make sure it's on level. And then just that continual monitoring of data. And I will say, just as I close here on the third grade portion, one of the biggest next steps that Ms. Arvin and I have chosen to take is that we want to be very intentional in meeting monthly with ourselves and our assistant principals in a principal cadre. Now, we don't want that to appear to be one more meeting for one more thing. We all have a lot of meetings. But years ago, when I was a curriculum coach, as an elementary curriculum coach, we met and did a principal cadre monthly, and that was a very beneficial time for us instructionally. We would get together and go to South, West, and Springs, and I think that it put us forward in a lot of ways. But we have gotten away from that over the years, so that is something that we want to start back. And also part of that is we want to be very intentional with some learning walks where she'll bring some teachers to my school and do these are the things we want you to look for. And then here's some things we want feedback on. And then vice versa, I want to go to West and do the same. Because there is no reason for me not to take advantage of every opportunity I can to change my leadership or instruction in a way that will support not only West Irvin, but the middle school and the high school, just as Stephen has always been so helpful to do with me. So we want to be so sure to be very intentional because we've got work to do. This data, we do not feel is representative of what our students are receiving from the instructional leaders in their school. And I think a lot of it, we just need to be very intentional about and focused about. So I will, like I said, continue to just work with her monthly, see what we can change, see what we can do. We don't want to wait till next year's K-Prep scores to say, oh, I wish we had have done. We want to fix some of those things now. So I'll pass that to you to talk about the rest.
I'm going to hand some additional data to you. I don't want to spend a long time talking about it, mostly because, and I'm being honest, it's a bit depressing. We did not get to where we expected to be by this time. So rather, let me grab my copy. To go ahead and continue, I mean, Jessica and I are very much on the same page. We used our map data last spring to go ahead and make some changes. So I want to start by looking at that data. So if you'll find the page that just says map and K-Prep. I gave you copies of all the scores so you didn't have to go searching for anything. So K-Prep is on one side for every subgroup and those kind of things. But on this side with the map, this gave us what we needed last spring to go ahead and realize that we had missed the mark. We knew in the spring we had missed it. The linking study for MAP to K-Prep is very strong. If anything, it will, usually the only mark we miss is due to what I believe is the writing that's included in K-Prep. We will end up with a few more novice than MAP actually indicates because the students have to write on K-Prep. And as Jessica just said, we've already realized as a district writing is one of our needs. So you'll see the difference there. But realizing last spring that we had missed the mark, we did not wait until October to start planning changes. So unless you have any specific questions about the data, I'll give you a moment to look. Maybe I should explain exactly what you're looking at there. You're looking from data all the way back to spring of 2018. You can match a group of students to a group of students if you know how to follow the path diagonally down that page. But this is truly just looking at years of data, not necessarily tracking a group of students. What I can tell you is we have made no great gains or no great losses in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade in Estill County for quite some time. We will make small changes, either an increase in novice, an increase in proficiency, and the next year we'll flip-flop it. And you know, we've had those conversations at the district level about how that has to stop. We have to get to a point where we are sustaining the growth of proficient students. So that's why this data is important to us. And we can see where we're missing the mark. And that's what I'd really like to talk with you next is, so what did we do? What marks do we think we missed in this data? So if you look at the one-pager that says 4th and 5th, please know 3rd grade is right there. There's nothing that we're doing for 4th and 5th that we're not doing for 3rd. There's nothing for 3rd that isn't going to happen with 4th and 5th. The tight collaboration between Springs and West is only going to strengthen the instruction for all students at both schools. But in addition to what is on that 3rd grade side, we realized we had missed the mark in several ways. The district and the state both advised us to read something that if you haven't read it as a board member, I would ask you to read it. It's called The Opportunity Myth. And it's a website that you can go to if you just Google The Opportunity Myth. It talks about students need the opportunity to be exposed to grade level content and pushed. Otherwise, knowing that we've got some folks up there with kids in college, graduating from college, heading that way. It's tough when they get there sometimes. So at West, we knew that was something we had to fix. The way Ms. Hall, myself, the leadership team went about that was we changed the master schedule. We included a unit block of time that's almost 90 full minutes for students that are supposed to be engaged in grade level content that combine science, social studies, and the reading and writing together. And it's been a big change. What I can tell you is it's a different learning atmosphere at West this year. Kids are excited. Teachers seem excited about what's going on. So that has been a fantastic change, but it had to start with a master schedule shift. We also even changed the way we were scheduling our special classes, which caused a little discourse, and I'm not sure as board members if any of you heard about that or not, but we switched to a 27-day cycle versus every week. But in doing so, we enabled our teachers to provide more continuous units of learning. We actually even gave the opportunity for students to have a second learning opportunity for social studies. So everything about that master schedule was built to provide students the opportunity to access grade level content. In addition to that, we decided relationships were very important at West. I know that Mr. Saylor and the board have really put a lot of focus on mental health. Building relationships is the key to that. We moved to all self-contained classrooms at West. So the students are with one teacher all day long. There was one teacher that I know absolutely dreaded the change, just balked at it. And he's not said this specifically to me yet, but to other folks, he said, I thought that this was the craziest idea I'd heard. He said, but I really like getting to know my kids, and I really like being able to work with multiple content areas. So I think it's going to be a very positive thing even for the long haul. We do have new and revised standards. That in itself has led to work. We have new pacing guides and new curriculum maps. We're continuing to complete those. They're not final. And I want to talk about that again in just a second. I'm going to come back and revisit that. But when you have those revised standards, it's just an opportunity to learn, to dig back into them. It's not a negative, but it is work. A lot of work. We're not all about tests. When I arrived at West, I was asked to decrease the number of hours students used in taking assessments. This was one that I felt like we needed to go back to, so we actually have 9 weeks, what we're calling engineer tests. We dive into that data very deeply. We've set aside time each 9 weeks for the teachers to work as a whole grade level team and dig into that data. Look at the difference between pre and post test. Figure out which standards we still need to go back and reteach. So we're trying not to leave anything uncovered. So in December, I could give you a full report of where we are, and I don't need to wait for K-Prep. Neither will the teachers. By the time we have map data and 2 units of engineer data, I can tell you where our kids are going to be. MTSS is just a new fancy way of saying RTI. We've talked about RTI for years. MTSS is a multi-tiered support system. We knew that was a missing piece at West. We do not have a lot of manpower at West. I think we might be one of the lowest number of staff members in the district at our school, at West. We try to make the most of every person that we have in that building. The MTSS system is something that occurs at the end of the day for every student, for every teacher. Students that are advanced go and work in larger groups, but they're doing project-based learning and trying to advance their learning. Students that are struggling are working in small groups. We're collecting data. Ms. Samples, this is very much like I think we've called it track in the past. We've called it a couple different names. But when we worked with Abry out of the University of Louisville, this is exactly what they recommended. And they recommended our map data to be the basis for that, which we've done in the past. I don't know how we moved away from that, so we just made a move back and are trying to work with fidelity with what we've had. As Jessica said, working with standards and that kind of thing, we also needed to revise our PLC protocol. We're getting a lot more teacher buy-in with that, and you're going to hear me say a couple of times things about teacher confidence. Our teachers have taken a lot of knocks over the past couple of years. socially, politically, and just the fact that at West we can't seem to get the scores where we want them to be, where we know they have to be. All of those things knock a teacher's confidence down. And I'm telling you, we have one of the hardest working staffs that you will find. And we just have to make sure we're aligned and working. That PLC protocol is a big part of that system and building that confidence and knowing what you need to do. We've realigned teams. We didn't feel like we were monitoring our CSIP the way we needed to. Teams were already realigned to do that this year, so that there are 3 goals, 3 numbers that we're actually working toward: the number of proficient students, decreasing the number of novice students, or closing the gap. And then we have our separate academic indicators, which include science, social studies, and writing. Our teams have been realigned to really look at those topics with intentional work. And I've been very proud of what our teachers are doing. And I think they're making a difference. I'd invite any of you to come over and come to one of their team meetings. They're meeting monthly after school, and they're doing some great work. We have increased counseling services this year. Ms. Wainscott is busy working with a program that I'm not sure who at the district office helped us to get that, but it was Too Good for Drugs. And Ms. Wainscott is busy working with our 5th grade students with that. She's purchased some additional counseling materials to work with our 3rd and 4th grade students this year. I feel like that is changing the culture in our building. She's also working with more counseling groups, and she has just gotten those started this second 9 weeks. We have 2 programs that are designed to work on the culture or the behavior piece. I think West Irvin has been known as the Wild Wild West for the last little bit, and we're really working to change that. PBIS is our system, our positive behavior intervention system. Teachers are really working to get that to a state of fidelity where we're using it the same all the time with consistency. Alveus is a program that KDE actually provided the materials and the training for us last year, and it is all about building empathy and stopping bullying in our building. And we have tried to provide the teacher with supports in getting that information out and in a usable form with students. Those were big steps. They were huge steps. We started those in the summer, and we're working on accomplishing those things with fidelity and consistency every day at West Irvin. In addition to those things, as Jessica already mentioned, we're working on revising our writing plan. That's important for us. Our 5th grade students will take that on-demand writing this spring. And that's not only about one test, that's about preparing them for the middle school and ultimately for the high school and college. So we know that that's important for us. And then we're going to be working with staff just in building their confidence through using a tool that helps them align their instruction to the intention of the standards. And those tools can be found on that Opportunity Myth website that I mentioned. KDE also has a few different things. So I'd love for you all to come visit. It's a fun place to be. The learning is exciting. And I can tell you right now, we're making a difference, and students are starting to master those standards.
Anyone have any specific questions for them?
I was just wondering how much parental involvement that you have on these levels, because obviously the school district and the teachers have a lot of responsibility, but the teachers can't do it all. And I was just wondering about parents and how involved are they in your schools? And
Well, at West, we have worked to try to get our PTO. We call it our WIC group. You have PTO at Springs. That is the most consistent group of parents in our buildings. It's a very small group for us at West.
Our group is a little larger. I mean, I can say for myself as a parent, I was a little more involved, and it became a little less involved, from the parent perspective. So I think part of that might just be where they're still babies, for me. I don't think it's any reflection of whether or not they're promoting it or communicating it. I just think parents are a little more involved, and it just lessens.
Well, as Tanya said, we've worked through our planning phase, and I did give you a copy of our planning document. It is still considered a draft because once we get feedback, I it will be revised by our leadership team and by our SBDM group. But I've had one response on Facebook. Now, I do still need to use some of the other avenues that we've discussed here tonight to make sure parents know. We would love to have parents be members of our teams that I talked about, because I feel like it's very difficult to monitor those pieces of the CSIP without community involvement. But it's been difficult to find a parent that can, I guess. I mean, we have a lot of busy parents too that can commit to come in and participate in those meetings.
I think that's something, the parent involvement component is just something that we always have to work really closely with especially our family resource centers, to make sure that we're providing adequate opportunities and communication about it. It's something that you can never let up on.
But don't you all think that that's something that we really need to encourage, and we need to
definitely
be reaching out to these people? Because, I mean, if you have a parent on board, it seems like that makes the teacher's job a lot easier, and it seems like sometimes maybe that's the missing piece.
I think it's the missing piece for every school district. I think it's the missing piece. I mean, I think you said it best in saying you can't do it on your own from 8 to 3. I mean, there are skills that just have to be reinforced at home, with reading, with multiplication tables, with, they're just skills that you cannot master alone.
Well, and I think at West, as I mentioned, the teacher's confidence, you can imagine, I've been a parent that had to try to look at standards at home or try to figure out what a child is doing in homework, and it's difficult. And by the time you get to 4th and 5th grade math, 4th and 5th grade reading content, it becomes difficult. And I think some parents they're put off a bit by what is expected of their own of their children, and the fact that they are no longer able to help. We've talked about how can we help change that culture? How can we help empower parents? And we haven't quite found the answer to that yet, but it's something that we talk about often.
Do you do that through your family nights?
We do, and we've had some great attendance at our family nights at West. We actually did our first parent-teacher conference and our first family night together. And I do not have the number for you, Sheila, but it was a great turnout.
That's great. That way you touch more people and more people involved.
Yes.
Well, finding more time is important.
That's a big...
And I know that they talk about how at the end of the day that every group has a dedicated time for RTI activities and stuff. I mean, that's the key in any school schedule, is finding more time, because there are parents that they're not capable of helping them, and and that's why it's important to have things like family nights and stuff like that, where you can come out and sort of have a situation where you can sort of help parents be able to help their children. I know Stephen does that with their Once Upon a Friday program, where they have kids that are not in preschool, they're able to come to school, and then they're able to work with the parents while the kids are actually being able to be with some different adults, and learning some different activities. So finding more time is important in the school schedule. So it's very important.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Anybody else? Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you, darling.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I've had a couple of people give you all a thumbs up on the tech center already. There's people actually watching. Yeah. There's people that watch these pretty intently, so you all got a couple of thumbs up on the.
Yeah, I'll sit, and she can scroll. You'll probably just have to hit the buttons there on the bottom. We'll start with the reading. At the bottom there, Mickey. Yeah. All right, we're going to try to quickly go through the data, but if at any point you have a question about what the data represents or want to know more about the data, just let me know. We're going to look at it individually by grades, and then we'll look at it by content as well as just the overall school scores. So starting with sixth grade reading, when you look at the yellow there, you will see that in sixth grade reading, they dropped their novice, dropped their apprentice, and grew both proficient and distinguished as far as the number of students go. So that's exactly what you want your data to look like. You want to see those increases in your proficient and distinguished. For math, they did the same thing with the exception of distinguished. They had a loss of 4 students, but also realized we had 6 fewer students than we did in 6th grade last year. So those numbers are skewed a little bit because of the changes in our student population from grade to grade. 7th grade reading, you're looking at kind of a skewed data here as far as they decreased their novice, but they increased their apprentice, decreased their proficient, and increase their distinguished. So what that is telling me as I'm looking at it is we lost some proficient kids into that apprentice category. So they moved the wrong direction in 7th grade reading. And that's something that you'll see when we get to the next steps that we're taking a look at. But we're still decreasing that novice. So, you know, that's a positive thing to look at when we're looking at the math or the reading in 7th grade. Now, 7th grade math, of all grades and all content areas, this is by far our best to celebrate. I would invite you all to come and sit in a 7th grade math class at some point in the day, because the way these 2 math teachers work together is pretty phenomenal. And I have told all of my math teachers actually that I would dare to say that there's a better middle school math department in the state than our middle school math department.
Did I work with them?
You've worked with them, that's right. And I mean, they're just phenomenal at working together, getting what needs to be done, knowing the students, looking at their data and making those changes. But when you look at your 7th grade math, they decreased their novice by 13 students, decreased their apprentice by 21 students, increased their proficient by 19, increased their distinguished by 15 students. Overall, an increase of 34 students that moved into that P&D category. So just phenomenal data, and if we can get all of our data to look like that at each grade level and each content, we would be a 5-star school. So, but I'm super, super proud of them. When you look at your 8th grade reading, it looks like 7th grade reading also. That decrease in novice and a slight increase in apprentice, decrease in proficient, increase in distinguished. So the difference in this one, however, it looks like the proficient moved up to the distinguished instead of going into that apprentice category. So they're moving their students in that right direction as far as that proficient and distinguished category. And then 8th grade math, across the state, this is kind of what 8th grade math is looking like. It is math that you and I would have done when we were in 11th and 12th grade. I mean, it's very difficult content, and it's hard to make that transition because middle school kids aren't at that abstract thinking yet, and they're asking you to do that. So we're struggling with 8th grade math right now as far as finding what's working best for our kids. But we've got some new things that we're looking at doing in the math classrooms that you will get a chance to see in a few moments. But we increased our novice, we decreased our apprentice, decreased our proficient, decreased our distinguished students. So that was a struggle all around for us in 8th grade. Before we look at overall school data, and I know I'm going through this quickly, but do you have any questions about grade level data that you would like to ask first? All right. Next is our overall reading scores, and this is just the combination of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. This is where we get scored for our gap and our growth. This is how they're looking at that. Overall, we decreased our novice, increased our apprentice, decreased our proficient, increased our distinguished, but had a loss of 24 students in the proficient and distinguished categories. State average was 59.6 for proficient and distinguished. We were at 54.5, so we were 5.1 percentage points below the state when it comes to our overall reading score. Looking at our overall math, we were actually better than the state average with our overall math for proficient and distinguished. We dropped our novice by 25 students, dropped our apprentice by 19, our proficient grew by 24, our distinguished grew by 13, overall growth of 37 proficient and distinguished students. Our school was at 55.6, the state was only at 46.4 for their average of proficient and distinguished. So we were 9.2 percentage points higher than the state with our proficient and distinguished, which is another reason why I said I'd put my middle school math teachers against anybody. For our next two scores, it is social studies and science. Our social studies is only in 8th grade. So when you're looking at these numbers, this is strictly 8th grade, but this is what is called a separate academic indicator for us when you're looking at our data. And our separate academic indicators include our science, social studies, and on demand. As far as our scores go, this was one of our lowest, our separate academic indicators were. Social studies, however, was not the reason. It was extremely high. Decreased novice by 3, decreased apprentice by 10, decreased our proficient by 19, increased our distinguished by 7. However, this is 25 fewer students than tested the year before. So again, keep that into account as you're looking at those numbers. Because if you will look at the state average, the proficient and distinguished for our school was 64.3. For the state, it was 58.8. So we were 5.5 percentage points higher than the state average in our social studies. That's another two group of teachers that work seamlessly together. They are involved in the charge grant, which Charlotte O'Brien is responsible for getting all of us as a part of that. They just do great activities. One day we went in and they had stick horses and they were doing westward expansion and they had to ride their stick horse and pick up a part from the state that was new in the westward expansion, go back and with your group explain it. So it's just lots of History Alive is something they're doing, lots of hands-on things that get those kids involved and help them to remember what social studies is all about. Our science, which is on the next page, is only 7th grade. We're still struggling with science. Bright spot is we improved our proficient by 10 students. So that was good. Overall, it's one of the lower ones. However, I will tell you that, and I don't know why I didn't put it on here, but we were just like 2 percentage points below the state average with the proficient and distinguished. So it is, again, a struggle across the state as far as teaching science. It isn't really a content test anymore. It's not about, do you know what a cell is and the parts of the cell? It is explaining an experiment and looking at a scientist's perspective and determining that perspective. It's more ACT-like in how that is tested, and it's not something that we've been teaching students to be those in-depth thinkers. So it's something that we are working on. 7th grade teachers are working really, really hard to get that content where it needs to be.
Well, if you think about it, also think about teaching science.
Yeah.
Because now the way we have to teach science is totally different from what we were doing several years ago. And because it was just the way that it was structured. So with the change in the standards and everything that's come about and the changes of standards and what students are being asked to do, now science teachers are having to adapt to that as well. So it's an instructional, it's a core content issue, but it's also an instructional issue as well. So I think you're going to see growth in that. We've seen growth over time, but now they're starting to get into seeing what exactly it takes for a student to be successful too. And I think there has been very little science instruction at West and Springs because it was just not an emphasis, to be honest. So now it's sort of recreating what it is to have science instruction in our schools and just a whole different thought process. So it will improve with time.
And we've been looking for persons from KDE to come in and help us look for things. There's just not a whole lot of people and resources out there for science right now. So we're kind of doing this one on our own within our district and within our building. All right. For some reason, I've got a slide out of order here, but the next thing that you're going to look at before we go to our on-demand writing is following the same group of kids through 5th grade through 8th grade, so you can see the growth that we are making with a particular group of students. What you saw in the beginning was just, we say, comparing apples to oranges. It was last year's group of 6th graders to the year before that. So this is the same group of students from their 5th grade year to their 8th grade year. And if you look at overall, we decreased novice within that group by 23%, decreased apprentice by 0.10%, increased proficient by 8.6%, increased distinguished by 14.9%. Overall, we increased the proficient distinguished of those students category by 23.5%, and that was in reading. In math, we decreased the novice by 15.9%, the apprentice by 1.1%, increased proficient by 13%, increased distinguished by 4%, overall increase of 17%. Now, the on-demand writing, this is the one that really kicked us. It really hurt us as far as our separate academic indicator. This is going to be our focus. As we look at next steps, you're going to see it's going to focus primarily on writing. Increased novice by 7, increased apprentice by 7, lost 44 students in the proficient category, and increased distinguished by 5. Again, that was a difference of 25 students, but that's still not good data. Even though you take 25 kids out of there, that's still not where we want to be with our data. So causes for us to celebrate before we look at our next step. We were considered what is a top performing school with a 4 out of 5 stars. Now, we did lose a star because of our special ed population. We grew our proficient and distinguished so rapidly that that population did not grow as rapidly, therefore we lost a star there. We decreased the novice. When you look at our math, we decreased that novice by 16.2% with that special ed population, but they had to grow the proficient and distinguished, so we lost a star because of that. We had an overall score of 67.5. To be a 5-star school, we had to have a 74. So it wasn't unreachable for us to be a 5-star school. Had our on-demand writing stayed even where it was the year before, we would have gotten very, very close to that mark. Reading and math, we were already at that 54.5, 55%. Our math, there was only 9.3% of our student body that was novice in math. With our 5-year plan that Tanya had talked about with our CSIP, the goal in 5 years is to be 10% novice. So as far as math goes, they've already met that novice benchmark there. Social studies was only 5.1% novice. That's like 5 kids, and that's it, that were novice in the whole 8th grade. We had a growth rate of 64.4, which is a very high rating. They did a low, a medium, a high, and a very high. We were a very high rating with our growth. We were ranked 95th out of 319 middle schools, which put us in the 70th percentile of all Kentucky middle schools. So to say we were happy with that is kind of an understatement. We were really, really proud of the work that was going on in our building. I have to say special thanks to my staff, because whatever initiatives I threw at them, they were willing and ready, and they took it with stride and did everything they could to make the learning process better for our kids. Mr. Yost, even though he's at the high school now, he was a part of this test data, so a big thanks to him for getting in those classrooms, offering lots of suggestions for the teachers and for our kids. Our kids didn't balk at us when we asked them to do something new and different. They didn't refuse to do it. They didn't just say, I'm doing it my way. They took the challenge, and they took the challenge with great pride. So
when you look at the data on the 5th grade through the 8th grade, that's the same group of kids that we're testing.
Yes.
So, and you have a huge increase in their scores.
Yes.
So is that because the light bulb just comes on? I mean, it's the same kids. How do you explain that?
I will tell you, and I'm not in West Building, so I can't speak for those teachers. I will tell you the culture of my building is such a great place to be as a student and to be as a teacher, that they just learn because they don't have a choice. The expectations are set so high by the teachers in that classroom, and if you don't master it, then we've got an intervention time, and you're pulled in during that intervention time, and you're worked with on a daily basis. My teachers will stay after school every day for an hour tutoring. They don't get paid to do that, but they're there because that's what those kids need. So every day a 6th grade teacher is going to be staying after school. Every day a 7th grade teacher is there. Every day an 8th grade teacher is there, because that's their expectation. Kids are going to master the learning before it's too late to catch them. So, failure's not an option in our building. It's just not an option.
So the kids they participate in that, they stay, and
oh, yes.
So the parent comes to pick them
Yes.
up, or you have a way to bus them home?
No, the parent picks them up. Yeah.
And so I guess Charlotte and them are laying the groundwork for a lot of this, and I was thinking maybe the light bulb just comes on by the time they start to get to the middle school level, maybe a level of maturity, and I know you all are taking a team approach, and I just was wondering.
With our teachers, and our schedule is, it's a very intentional schedule in our building, so that there is fluid movement between classes. Let's say we've got first period 7th grade math going on, and those two teachers are working together. They've got 80% of their kids that have moved on. They've got that, but they've still got 20% that didn't. So they're combining their classes, and that 80%, one of the teachers is doing an enrichment activity with them. The other 20%, intervention is going on immediately. We're not waiting to see on the cumulative exam if they've gotten it or not. They're going to be tested daily to make sure that they've mastered that concept.
I guess I don't mean to be asking hard questions, but.
They're not, yeah, it's not hard questions. I just can't, I don't feel comfortable speaking
Oh,
for
no,
Wes
yeah.
because I don't know. But I do know failure's not an option in our building, and expectations are set very high for every kid.
I know Charlotte's like that too.
Yeah.
I was just wondering.
Yeah, yeah, expectations are set high, and, our Renaissance program, I think probably has an impact on that too, because kids want to participate. They want to have the opportunity to get to go to Kings Island at the end of the school year. They want to be in those Renaissance rallies. We just had one on Friday. That might have been one of our best ones yet. I mean, it was just really, really fun. So they know they're not going to get a card, and they're not going to be in there if they don't maintain those high grades. If they're not at school, if they're not behaving in the classrooms, then they lose those opportunities. So
I would say this too, I think it's about leadership. We've got our central office leadership team. I believe that we are doing our best to make sure that our principals and our school leadership teams have what they need to be successful. And I know that our administrators at our school level, they're trying their best to make sure that their teachers have what they need to be successful. I do think that it does come down that one of the things that we're starting to see is we're building that teacher leadership. You've seen that through the National Board Certified Teachers that we are starting to have, and we should be hearing something about our next group of National Board Certified Teachers here in the next few days. I think it's around
I thought it was December, isn't it?
sometime in
Yeah.
December. So we're about a month away from knowing who else in our district has done that. I do know, and I truly believe that the change at the middle school occurred several years ago when a group of teachers finally said, we're better than this. We can do this. And I'll guarantee there's a lot of things that take place in that building. She doesn't have to pull them, push them, make them do it. They're going above and beyond. Those teachers aren't being paid to stay after school. They're doing it because they know that they have to find extra time to help these kids. So they're going above and beyond, and it's paying off. When the teachers took ownership of that, it's paying off. Now, listen, that's not to put down any other school that we have. I mean, that's a process. It takes time. And, it goes back to test scores. Kids that score novice, they don't know the material. They don't know the content. So how are you going to help those students learn that content? Students that are apprentice, they know some of the content, but they're just not able to apply it. They're not able to use it. And proficiency, in reality, proficiency is really a good, then better average student. We're not asking, proficiency is not some unattainable goal out there. So it is something that it takes leadership at every level in order to do that. And especially, listen, the key is teachers. Listen, you can hire anybody to be your superintendent. If you hire a good principal that can keep order and do those things, listen, those positions are important. And I know that principals are important, but I'm telling you, the classroom teacher in that classroom doing everything they can and understanding that they are the reason that kids are successful. I don't want them to take the blame. Listen, if we have areas of growth, then it's our job as the leadership team of this district is to find ways to help them become better teachers. But as long as they're willing to work hard and they're willing to try, you're going to see growth. And that fifth grade to eighth grade data, that was a great chart to look at those students, where they came into that school and where they left. And that's what we need to be able to see when kids come into kindergarten, and we're able to see where those kids start at and where they end up with in the fifth grade. That's going to be some great data. That's one of the reasons that we're going to be doing a second grade K-Prep assessment so that they can be timed, so that they'll understand exactly what that test is look like. Why should it be when they get to third grade, that's the first time they ever take a timed test? and with that type of pressure. So it's really important. Just like with high school, if the first time they ever take an ACT assessment or an ACT lookalike assessment, if it's at their junior level, they're not going to do well. I mean, because test taking is a skill in itself. But I've always said, and I think the principals would agree with this, that we need to be about teaching and learning, and if we'll do that, the test will take care of itself. When we get where we need to be as a community of teaching and learning, then the test will be fine. Mm-hmm. And one thing I will add, Andrea, I'll take the blame for writing. I'm going to take the blame for writing. We talked about writing for the last 4 years, and we've just sort of, you know, we had a couple years ago that West was a bright spot. Their writing went up. They focused on writing. And then it sort of died down. And writing has not been a focus. And I called the principals together. They'll tell you, listen, you can score me ineffective this year. If we don't have a writing plan before we get to the spring, we're going to have a writing plan before we get through Christmas. Because I've told every principal, we're ineffective if we allow this to go on with writing. Writing is killing us. Last year at the high school, when Miss Tucker and they made an emphasis on writing, they'll tell you here in just a minute, writing was one of their strong points. But we just can't be emphasized at one time and then, okay, we've arrived, and then we let it go and we fall back. And that's why we've got to keep moving forward together. And like I said, I've told them, we're not going to let writing did bite the middle school, and they were a 5-star school. If we had done what we should have done in writing 3 years ago, we'd be sitting here with a 5-star school. That's on me. I'm going to take the blame for that, but I'll guarantee you this, we will not suffer through another spring without a writing plan and without a plan that goes all the way from K through 12. They just visited Carter County here the other day. I fully expect at some point in time within the next 3 years, there's going to be schools coming to visit us and ask us what we're doing in writing, because we're going to make it an emphasis. And we're not going to fall back in reading. We're not going to fall back in math. We're going to keep everything moving forward. So hats off to the middle school. I mean, listen, very good, really unfair. I think the change in the star rating is a very unfair thing, because if you can increase the number of proficient and distinguished students for all students at a rate greater than another subgroup, you shouldn't be punished.
Well, and only a 4 or a 5-star school was punished. If you were a 3, a 2, or a 1, you weren't punished. You didn't lose a star. So,
it's just one of those.
It is what it is.
It's one of those things. And listen, we have a moral imperative that we need to help every child. We don't need to be about a particular group of kids. We've got to be about all 2,200 kids. And so we accept the fact that's what the system is. But the bottom line is that is really, I believe, an unfair measure. But we can still address that. We need to look at, okay, what are we doing for special needs students? How can we be more effective in that area? So
and I actually created a slide, and I don't know how I skipped it, but there's one in there with our special education population that shows the increases and decreases with that.
The 5 through 8, is that last year's 8th grade?
Correct.
Okay, so it's current.
So current freshman.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you need a current freshman group.
And that would be some good data moving forward for West and Springs to have, really starting with 2nd grade with that MAP Lincoln study, and be able to track those students. If we could take our 5th grade kids that leave 5th grade this year, so next year when we have this time before the board, that we would show those 5th grade students and where they started. It might be a little hard because 2nd grade, we're going to score it. We would have to use MAP data, which is not really, again, it's not timed at the 2nd grade, but we can probably do that for sure, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and sort of see some numbers, and that's some good data for us to look at. So, thank you.
All right, do you want me to do next steps real quick, or?
Yeah, if you want to, yes.
We are going to use our name and claim time to focus on apprentice students so that we don't have that heavy apprentice. We're moving them on up to that proficient. We are going to continue with our relationship building because I think that that and our PLC process probably has the largest impact on our growth than anything else we have done. Sources of strength, we've been able to get into our building, and our teachers and our students are doing some really great things with our sources of strength, our Renaissance, and then we have Mountain Comp Care, which is providing counseling services, because we know if we don't treat the overall mental health of these children, then we're not going to see them progress anywhere. So, guided reading, we're doing 2 times per week in 6th grade. We're doing leveled reading and writing to learn 2 times per week in all content areas. Leveled reading is we actually look at their Lexile level, and all students are reading the same article, but it's on their content area, or it's on their level of reading on that content, so that comprehension is going to be measured because it's at a level they can read. And then writing to learn has to be, these are non-negotiables within our classroom, so they're showing those on their intentional planning guide when they're doing that. To help with our on-demand writing, it's no longer just going to be an 8th grade assessment. In 6th grade and in 7th grade, they're going to be doing those 2 times per 9 weeks, with one of those times being a live scoring. Our SED students that get readers and scribes will have those assigned in the very beginning when we do our live scoring, so that that's going to be their reader and scribe throughout the year. That way they have that relationship built with that person. We are doing descriptive feedback daily on the monitoring of the understanding of the learning target. When I go in, that is one of the things I'm looking at, and if that assessment is not matching the learning target, then the teacher and I are having a conversation as to why it isn't. The fluid movement of students, which we'd mentioned earlier, at any time, those kids are constantly moving in and out of classes. And then based on something we saw at our Carter County visit, we are going to kind of chunk the writing process so that in 6th grade, they're going to master what an introductory paragraph looks like. That's the one thing that they have to focus on in 6th grade. By the time they get to the 7th grade, it's the 3 paragraphs in the body. And then when they get to the 8th grade, it's the counterclaim and the conclusion. That way, by the time they leave the middle school, they will have a mastered piece of writing. We're looking at that district-wide writing plan, which we will implement immediately. There's going to be a lot of mentor teaching and modeling of lessons. There's going to be some coverage of classes so that my real good and experienced teachers can get in there and mentor for some of those newer teachers that haven't had the opportunities. And then we're going to do a group scoring of writing pieces so that we can assess mastery at each grade level. Any questions? All right, thank you all for giving us this opportunity.
Come on down.
Go to the next contestants.
You said.
That seat warm?
Very much. Well, good evening. Much in the same way, we're going to go through kind of the data from last year at the high school. As Ms. Williams said, I was at the middle school last year with her, but we've looked at this data up, left, down, and right to look at areas of strength, areas of weakness, and things we have to get right this year as we go forward. So let's go ahead and start off. What we're going to do is we're going to first walk through what the scores were for reading, math, science, and on-demand writing. We're going to go through a big change this year at the high school level. Proficiency last year was determined by reading and math scores on the ACT. That will not be the case this year. They're instituting a K-Prep exam at the sophomore level for reading and math. So we're going through those changes all at the same time we look at this data, which is based on the ACT scores from last year. So when you look at the reading data, 33, maybe 1 out of every 3 kids was proficient or distinguished on the ACT on reading. The novice scores, if you'll go to the next slide for me, Ms. Wilson. The novice scores went up significantly from 2 years ago. And this also leads to something we're going to talk about a little bit more later, but when you dig into this information even deeper, what we found is that there was a 20% gap between our young men and our young women on the ACT in terms of novice. Over half of the young men in the junior class scored novice on the ACT last year. Less than 1/3 of female students did. So that's something we'll talk about a little more later, but it's a point when you dig into this data a little more that we'll get into. In math, novice 35.8, proficiency 24.8. If you look on the next slide, you'll see the comparison to 2 years ago. And what you see is that there was a slight increase in novice and a decrease in proficiency from 2 years. And those are ACT to ACT with those 2 years. So those were the areas where you see areas we've got to improve, but then when it comes to science and on-demand writing, we actually had some success stories here. The novice percentage was 24% and the proficiency was 24.9. You can see the state average was just below 30. As Ms. Williams alluded to, the next generation science standards really require a fundamental shift in how we teach science at the high school and middle school levels. So really getting that right in the process how we're going to assess students is a critical piece of this puzzle. And there's just not a lot of resources out there, so we're trying to make these on the fly as we go along. But if you look at the year prior, we had a 7.5% decrease in novice on science from 2 years ago to last year, and an increase of almost 1% in terms of proficiency. So it's trending in the right direction, but we've got to continue to figure out ways to better assess them when there's really no resources coming from the state level, but we have to figure out how we're going to test them to a much deeper level, similar with social studies, as we'll talk about in a moment. On-demand writing was the clear success story for last year. 15.1% novice on writing, which I'll show you in a second, it's a big decrease. We also had a 44% proficiency. So this was the huge area of emphasis for the high school the last couple of years, and you see their proficiency score is considerably higher because of that. So as you look, decrease in novice, but an 8.5% increase in proficiency from 2017-18 to 18-19. So as you look at this is something I really want to spend some time focusing on, because when we walked through the data this year, what I did is I looked at my staff and I said, I'm going to show you all a series of charts and you all tell me what you see. It's much more effective in my mind to let them look at the issues and tell me what they see rather than me just point it out to them. So we started looking at our data, and right away, this is what jumped out, was transition readiness. So transition readiness, in a very short manner of speaking, is both academic and career readiness. For academic readiness, you have to meet an 18 in English, 19 in math, and 20 in reading on the ACT. Must meet all 3 of those. For career readiness, you either must get an industry certification, complete a pathway, and pass an end-of-program assessment, what used to be called the COSA, now it's the EOP, or you have to complete 2 dual credit classes within a technology field or agriculture, something like that, to be career ready. So those are the 2 ways we get there. From 2017-18 to 2018-19, we saw a decrease across the board in transition readiness. Our transition indicator went down 12 points. This year, I have been fortunate enough to get to go to NISL, the National Institute for School Leadership. One thing they talk about a lot at NISL is benchmarking yourself against other schools. Look at surrounding areas, the schools that you have a lot in common with, and figure out where are your areas of strength, where are your areas of weakness, and how do you improve from there. So when I showed them this slide, this one became readily apparent. What we did is I actually benchmarked us to every surrounding county, and then a few more eastern Kentucky counties that have similar demographic numbers to us. When you look, you see proficiency, middle of the pack, separate academic indicator, right around the 30 to 40% mark of those schools. But the one thing that automatically stood out to my staff was the transition readiness number. We had a graduation rate at the high school last year, 4-year cohort rate of 98.2%. That transition readiness indicator number isn't a percentage, it's an indicator. 46.3% of our students graduated last year academic or career ready. So if you ask me what is our emphasis this year at the high school, here it is. If over half of our students are graduating and they're not academic or career ready, we've got a problem. Making sure that our students are ready for that next phase of life is the number one priority for us at the high school this year. Making sure that we are reaching those students and helping them be ready for either college, career. You look at 2 years ago, we haven't completed the graduate survey yet. That'll be completed by the end of this month. But 2 years ago, only 40% of our students that graduated attended a 2 or 4 year college. About 9% went on to technical school or vocational school. What that tells me is that we have to emphasize career readiness as much, if not more, than academic readiness. We have to make sure these students are ready for whatever lies ahead.
And can I add, you all took a step tonight to help that with the Area Technology Center being able to come online 2 years from now. It is going to make a huge difference in being able to have kids focus on careers.
And that is why when I talk at the high school this year, I do a lot of talking about, as Ms. Isaac said, that future thinking. We're planning stuff for 2 years from now, because when that ATC opens, this entire ballgame changes for us in terms of what we're able to do for our students in terms of vocational and career readiness. But we still have students that are going to be going through our school prior to the ATC opening. So we're taking steps this year to help those students as well. So areas for improvement for us this year, we really have to focus in on reading and math, both increasing proficient and distinguished and reducing novice. The reality of the story is, if we simply go back to the numbers from 2 years ago, which would represent a significant increase in proficiency and a decrease in novice, and we move the transition readiness number up to 60, we'd be a 3-star school. It's simply a fact of we have to put the systems in place this year, and that's what we're doing to make sure we get this right. For transition readiness, again, less than half of our graduates attend college, so the emphasis on career readiness has to match the emphasis on academic readiness. We have a significant number of our students who graduate high school and go immediately into the workforce. We need to make sure they have the skills to be ready to do that. Our special education gap continues to persist, with the exception of science. Our science scores, our special education population actually outperformed our general population. But in math, reading, and on-demand writing, that gap persists. And we need to continue the gains in on-demand writing. Go back one more.
Go back.
Yep. So, I wanted to talk a minute about the big changes that are ahead for us at the high school level. Again, the changes in accountability this year. We've actually got 2 targets we have to hit this year. Our juniors will take the ACT still, in terms of meeting academic benchmarks for transition readiness, but our proficiency will now come from our sophomores this year. Which this puts me in a unique position because I spent all of last year analyzing the data for this year's sophomores and this year's freshmen. So I know what those students came to us with, as well as where they're at right now in terms of MAP assessments and things of that nature. So what we need to do is, when I look at my teachers, I can say, here's where they've come to you from 8th grade. Our job is to maintain and improve. Because if you look at the numbers from last year's data and you look at where the 8th graders were at this year, that is a huge difference. So our job is to take the work that's being done at the lower grade levels and continue that good work at the high school. That's why a lot of the things that I worked on with Ms. Williams last year we're bringing down to the high school this year from the middle school. Whether it be simply our discipline matrix from PBIS, whether it be the intentional question planning guide that I think makes a huge difference in focusing instruction and what the priorities are going to be every day in the classroom, we're bringing each of those things to the high school this year and implementing those. And then, of course, a big thing for us in 2 years is going to be the opening of the Area Technology Center, but also the change in graduation requirements. The freshmen that we have this year will be in a different set of graduation requirements than the current students are. Algebra 2 in 2 years will no longer be a graduation requirement. Students will take Algebra 1 in geometry, and then it says for math, as well as for English after the first 2 years, they must have 2 credits that are aligned to the student's individual learning plan, which means that we need to think about ways to be flexible with our schedule and our planning to meet the needs of those students. So if we have a student, for example, who wants to be a diesel mechanic, how can we think of ways to give them opportunities to complete math credits their junior and senior year that are more aligned with their career pathway as opposed to the traditional college-bound pathway? So we've got to get creative with how we're scheduling and creative with what we're doing in terms of meeting those student needs for all of our students going forward. Are there any questions at this point before I get to next steps? Okay. Our next steps, we are really beefing up our professional learning communities this year, following that Plan, Do, Study, Act model. We're tracking our data for both our free and reduced lunch populations, which is 65 to 70% of our students, as well as our special education populations. I've also asked them, because of the gap that we saw between males and females last year, to begin looking at our males versus females to see if those gaps are persisting this year when we look at MAP data for freshmen and sophomores, mastery prep for juniors, as well as their in-class assessments. Focusing on the 80% mastery number, reteaching standards that students have not mastered. They're using IXL for in-class interventions this year. We're looking at ways to even augment that more going forward. This year, we're using ESS money to provide tutoring after school 1 day each week for each of our core content areas. We're working on developing currently a school-wide literacy plan. The writing plan is going to be at the district level, which we're working on right now, but we're also going to work on a reading plan across the board. If we want to improve reading and writing outcomes at the high school level, it cannot just simply be an English thing. Science has to be doing it, social studies has to be doing it, math's got to even be doing short answer problems. So we're going to implement a school-wide literacy plan across the board, where there'll be expectations from all of our departments. Every teacher in the school this year in the professional growth plan had to put a literacy goal in their growth plan of how they were going to improve literacy instruction in their classroom. Because 1 out of 3 students graduating high school proficient in reading is just not acceptable. So we're working on that hard this year. We put in an ACT prep course so that students can gain the skills needed to meet benchmarks on either the ACT or the Coyote exam. The Coyote exam is another pathway we have for students to demonstrate academic readiness. One thing we are doing is the high school historically has been largely resource classrooms in terms of special education. We are working to make some changes in that area. They are some small changes this year, and they will be full-blown changes the following year of increasing our co-teaching settings. The research will tell you right now that if students, special education students, are in a classroom where they have both a content teacher as well as a methods teacher from special ed, they are more successful. So we are working to begin implementing that in our freshman classes this year, but that will become a full-scale system going forward. Working on adjusting our master schedule to allow the flexibility we need to meet student needs. When the Area Technology Center opens in 2 years, we're going to have a system where over half of our students will either be taking vocational courses or taking dual credit classes, which means that we've got to have a schedule that allows us to meet the needs of both, as well as meeting intervention needs at the freshman and sophomore level for those students as they're continuing the foundational reading and math skills. So we've got to come up with a one-size-fits-all schedule that really meets the needs of all of these students. And that's something we are already in the process of exploring. I've already visited 2 high schools this fall, both over my fall break, to explore their master scheduling processes and what they use so that we can make a better master schedule that fits the needs of all of our students. We're increasing opportunities for students to demonstrate career readiness, even to the point of I'm working with our ag teacher, Ms. Miller. We are working extremely hard to get a group of kids who are going to take an industry cert exam this year in terms of pesticides. We only have currently employed in the district, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Saylor, I think we have 2 people who are licensed to spray pesticides that work for the school board. This is a need. There are always going to be jobs in this area. So let's get kids certified. If we have kids who are wanting to do agriculture, who want to have farms, they may need to be able to do those things. So let's figure out new ways we can help these kids gain a skill that's going to help them in life. And then we're putting a system in place to track student progress toward transition readiness goals across the board, from where they're at in their pathways to where they're at in their academic goals. But as I talked to Mr. Saylor, all of that stuff is important. But if we don't get this piece right, it's all for nothing. And that's why our huge emphasis through the first trimester has really been the culture piece at the high school. We are doing a lot this year in terms of meeting the needs of our students. Sources of strength at the district level, we've brought that in. October 24th, we did a mental health screening for every single child in our building unless the parents opted out via waiver. We want to be proactive in meeting our students' needs, so this will allow us to see what are some of the issues our students are having. Ms. Caldwell is coming in from the board a couple of days a week, and she's going to start hosting some groups. We have a new social worker from Mountain Comp Care who's with us 3 days a week, in the middle school 2 days a week, who's already built a caseload of over 20 students where she's meeting to provide counseling services. One of the first decisions we made was to move our building assessment coordinator position out of counseling to our librarian, Ms. Hall, so that our counselors can focus full-time on student needs. They don't have to mess with testing this year. They get to focus on students and what their needs are. To the point when we did our staff training on mental health first aid yesterday, that was the day when we were out of school. All staff reported and certified staff received their mental health first aid training. The trainers from Pulaski County told us about a system they're using called QPR. It's question, persuade, refer. Because one of the needs we see is that we can train teachers all day long, but our students have to be able to have these conversations as well. Because a lot of times, students will know about these things before we do. And so training our students to be able to meet the needs of each other as well is going to be a critical piece. So we just started today investigating that. Ms. Rader and I had multiple conversations today about how we're going to try to roll this out with our students to help them. We're doing attendance interventions. Our attendance this year up to this point, I just checked it for the year, we're up to almost 94.5% attendance, which anything above 94% for a high school in Eastern Kentucky is reason for celebration. So we're happy with where our attendance is at right now, but we also know we have to build on that because flu season's not here yet. So we've got to build and we've got to continue to work with our students to get them in school, because when they're in school, they're learning and we're able to meet their needs better. On the radar, and this is a big one, I've actually had conversations with a couple of you all. This is a big one for me. As we start looking at our data, what we're finding is through our Check and Connect mentoring program, we're meeting the needs of students who do struggle with mental health issues, who struggle with attendance issues. Our Persistence to Graduation tool is big with that. We've got adults in the building connecting with students, mentoring them at least twice a week. We've got our Mountain Comp Care. But the thing is, we've got a segment of our students who aren't going to show up as red flags on anyone's radar. They aren't going to show up as kids who may have, certain issues that would lead us to believe they need extra help. So what do we do for those students who aren't showing up on our proactive measures but still need that extra boost? And that's the next step for us, is we need to design a program that's going to meet the needs of those students as well. Because last year when I was at the middle school, we were able to identify a group of students. Ms. Williams, I don't think will mind me telling this. We identified a group of students who were apprentice students historically, but they weren't your free introduced lunch kids. They weren't your kids who were novice. In essence, they weren't any of your traditional groups you would target for interventions. And we found that there was a group of about 40 students who fit in that mold, who we were able to target and give them some additional interventions in reading last year, because they're just traditionally not the groups that you give those extra interventions to. We need to do the same thing at the high school and identify those students and create a program for them that's going to meet their needs. So those are our next steps for the high school this year. Do you all have any questions for me?
Mr. Yost, if you don't care, if you can get that document to me, I will send you all this document as well.
I shared it with you earlier today.
And I know you sent it to Google Docs. I'll get it to you.
All right.
I just had a couple of comments. I guess the last thing that you touched on was a mentoring program for kids that are underperforming or that are at risk academically. And that's something that's very near and dear to my heart. I have a lot of conversations with people about this all the time. In Kentucky and as a school district, we always told no child left behind. And how are we going to keep from leaving a child behind? And I know for a fact that there are kids that are at the high school that are underperforming. And they're not going to volunteer to go to an ACT prep class. They're not going to volunteer to stay for the 1-hour tutoring session that the English teacher is staying for. They're not going to do some of those things unless somebody literally kicks them in the butt. And so that's the kid that I'm concerned about, the ones that are from families that care, the ones that, you know, we know they can do better. And we know that they can perform at a higher level. And that's what I really want to see come out of this, is that we pick those kids out and they have somebody that's going to kick them in the butt and get them in gear.
And that's the point of that system we're putting into place, to start monitoring early. So that system we're putting into place isn't going to be something we just start junior and senior year. We're actually going to have a document for every single student in our building, freshman through senior year, where we can begin early interventions with those students. Where after Christmas, we can identify that first group of students and where they're beginning to slip, so we can begin bringing in those interventions. And so creating that system is really the big focus for us over the next month, with me and my counseling department, Ms. Wilson and Ms. Sutter, trying to create that system where we identify those students, and then we're able to provide them with the supports that they're going to need to perform at the level they're capable of.
And then just another question that I had was the culture at the high school historically for the last few years has been really bad. And I was just wondering if you could speak to, has there been a change in culture? Do you have buy-in from teachers on all the things that you've identified? What direction are we going with that? And I know Charlotte and Ms. Mullins and Ms. Williams, they all spoke to what great culture they have and the learning environment they have. Can you address any of that for us?
It's something we're working on. And I'll tell you that the feedback I've gotten from parents, from teachers, from students, is that there's been a dramatic shift just in the first 3 months of the year. And I'll tell you that's through no small part due to some very intentional efforts. I'm going to give Ms. Wilson a lot of credit here as well. We have made an effort to be at so many events this year. And it's making a difference because kids are seeing that we care about them not just as students, but in their other activities as well. I had a mom, no joke, last night, my son got good grades and he's in first grade. We took him to Cracker Barrel for dinner. And a mom approached me at Cracker Barrel from the high school. And her exact words to me, my wife just looked at me afterwards and just smiled. She said, "Thank you for being willing to kick my son's butt. And thank you for helping the dads put together the props at the state marching band tournament." Because it's the little things that are going to make the difference in terms of culture. It's being willing to go out and learn the students by name. If I need to talk to a student about talking too loud in the hallway or saying something they shouldn't in the hallway, if I can say their name when I do it, it changes the whole ballgame. Ms. Wilson's been extremely intentional about that. I've been extremely intentional about that. Simply getting to know our students this year, letting them know that we care and that we're not going to back down in terms of what our expectations are. Part of that transition readiness piece, and the teachers and I have had some frank conversations about this, it means that our expectations have to go up. And that's going to get pushback at points because it means that kids are going to be held to a higher standard than they've ever been held before. And that's going to get pushback. It already is getting pushback in some ways. But the kids are beginning to understand that if we raise those expectations but also increase the support for them, it's going to help with that culture piece, that learning environment. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But the feedback I've been getting from parents and teachers and students is that it's much improved in the first 3 months of the year. And they notice that we're going above and beyond and trying to meet student needs and show them how much we care and how much we want them to be successful.
And I guess with, I think all of these are great ideas, but we have kids that are juniors and seniors that are going to be ready to graduate, and are they going to fall into that 40-something% that's not college or career ready? Have we already lost those kids?
And I'll tell you this, we haven't. We've put into place systems this year for our seniors where I am convinced, and I'll be happy to bring this data to you as soon as we've got it in the spring, where we're going to have that number of career-ready students is going to be nearly doubled this year. And I'm saying it publicly, so I'll put my money where my mouth is on it. We are going to see an extremely large increase in that number this year. We are putting into place some serious things with that. And that also gets to the point of simply looking at every single senior and doing a transcript review and saying, where are you at in terms of your pathway? And as soon as we've got that done for our seniors by Christmas, we'll do it for our juniors. Where are you at in terms of your career pathway? Where do I need to put you for this next couple of terms so that we can make sure you finish that pathway? Every single one of our CTE teachers is giving us a 4-course sequence they want to follow from here on out, putting every student in that so that we know from a scheduling perspective where they need to be and what classes they need to take next to complete their pathway so they can sit for the EOP. Those are things we put into place now and things that we are going to continue to grow. We're starting with seniors and juniors right now, but throughout the spring, we'll be doing it with sophomores and freshmen as well.
I know that I've asked some really hard questions tonight, and, a lot of our focus since I've been on the board is about getting some of our infrastructure in place and getting these buildings up to where they need to be and getting our VOTEC center. But, we've gotten a lot of that done. And so these test scores and where we need to be and where we need to go is what I'm wanting to hear. And so I'm sorry I've asked some hard questions tonight.
That's your job.
That's what we need to be doing, so.
Okay.
Well, he said something about getting pushback. Nobody would accept the fact that we're going to lose 50% of our basketball games. They don't think that's acceptable. Or if it's athletics or our band doesn't go out with the expectation, well, we get to compete and we'll be okay. We do or we don't. So I think it's sort of ironic sometimes that we have expectations in those extracurricular areas or co-curricular areas, but we don't have the same expectations when it comes to academic performance or career readiness performance. And we've got to make that shift. I mean, we should want to be the best school in the 14th region. And our kids should want that. They want that. They want that in softball. They want that in baseball. They want it in basketball. That's why we have coaches that come and go, because if coaches can't perform, you're going to find some other coach, So I think the same expectation has to be academically. We have to look at it, whether it's a focus on academic or career areas, we've got to have that same focus. And
I agree.
We've got to realize that that's the goal here. So let there be pushback. Let there be pushback. If there are parents that come to you and there's pushback from parents on that, I guess you look at them, you have to look at them and say, really? Really? You're going to want that? And I've had a couple that's questioned me over some things in terms of some new things that you all are doing. And I just said, this is what's best for kids. And that's what we got to remember. Is it best for kids? If we make every decision based on what's best for kids, then that's the standard. That's the standard we have to have. And I think you'll start seeing kids start coming around. You're going to have fewer and fewer kids that's going to question, well, why do I have to do that? They didn't have to do that last year. You're setting the standard for the future coming. So I think it's really an important year to do that. And I think we have to set lofty goals. We wouldn't accept it in any of our other programs. Why are we accepting it academically? We shouldn't be doing it.
I agree.
I think that the principals agree. I think we've got a good district and school leadership team, and I think we're going to see that there's progress that's been made. We are a lot further along than we were 4 years ago. Maybe not where we want to be right now. We should have been a little bit further along than we are, but we're a lot further than we were 4 years ago. And our goal is that we're positioned right now to make some major gains. It's just a matter, let's keep our focus, let's keep working hard, and I think that we'll see a big difference as we move forward.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
And I'll say this, as a board team, I appreciate this board. You've had to make some tough decisions when it's come to some financial decisions in terms of facilities and those types of things. There's tough decisions made on the facility tax, but there's been tough decisions made on being able to provide the resources that are out there. And as a board, you are providing the resources necessary for us to be successful, and I appreciate your all's efforts. Even though you've got double the pay now for every meeting you attend, it's still not worth sometimes. You're not doing it for the pay. You are truly public servants, and I would say that you're truly public servants. You're basically volunteering your time, and you're doing it for the well-being of our kids in Estill County, and I appreciate what you all do as a board. And I know that I speak for the administrative staff and the other employees that are here this afternoon, so thank you all.
Everybody's got 30 minutes to go vote.
Yeah, if you've not voted, you have 30 minutes.
I need a motion to adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?